When is an emerald an emerald? I would agree, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and a wise person would be able to see an emerald in the rough. This is when looking beyond the surface becomes important. Just as knowing where we are in the process as each layer is removed is also important. Gemfields would assign value to the rocks they pull out of the mine, just as they would to the rough-cut pieces they create through the trimming and cobbing processes. They are all valuable steps to get to the piece of jewelry. And if we ignore those steps, then the enjoyment of processing the emerald is lost. I have learned we can say the same when we are developing and working our own process. If we do not acknowledge the work we have accomplished at each of these steps and assign value to it, we will have a hard time continuing all the steps until we get to the most valuable treasure at the end. It helps to see the beauty of where we are and know it is invaluable to where we are going. In hindsight, I have had a number of moments in my life where I have not taken the time to peel back the layers to discover what lay beneath. When I start a project, I have a vision of where it is going and even a high-level definition of success. As I meander through the work, the details flesh and morph the vision out. No matter the path I take, though, when I realize the vision, I consider the project complete. That isn't always the truth. Often, that is not a big deal, but I do find when I mentally have checked anything off my list and later have to put it back on my list, a growl begins to emerge from somewhere deep inside. I believe this is why I hate maintenance tasks. They keep turning back up. There are times, though, when putting something back on the list will derail me. For example, say I am working with a few people on planning an event. Together we have developed a task list, and everyone volunteers for various tasks. At some point, a colleague looks at my list and comments I've taken on too much. I take a look, and while I know I could manage it, it would be easier if I didn't have all of it. She readily suggests she will take on the catering, and I am grateful I can focus on the graphics for the posters. Time passes. My task list is being well managed, and I'm able to relax and enjoy myself. 2 weeks before the event, the group reconvenes to check how things are going, and my colleague has not been able to handle the catering. The task moves back to my list, and I now feel I'm in a pressure cooker. What bothers me most is I could have managed my time if the catering was on my list from the beginning. It was putting it back on my list that caused all the issues and my lost sense of control. Managing my task list has been something I have both failed and excelled at throughout my life. With every career change, I have found a growth opportunity when I approach task lists. One such time was when I transitioned from engineering to design. Iterations of prototypes are a mainstay of the design process. This philosophy pushed me to open up mentally to make room for incompleteness. In fact, one mentor of mine said the greatest issue for designers is the attitude the work can always be improved. So it can become hard for a designer to let go of a project, since in their mind, it is never truly done. I laughed out loud because I thought engineers had the corner on the market for adding on more and more. At first, I saw the iterations as repeating work and tried my best to minimize the number of prototypes by planning well and only changing the resolution between prototypes. It was only when I was interacting with and presenting the prototypes I realized something more could be gained. By watching the user get confused with how to pick up a prototype or how to store the product, I was able to see how many more iterations I needed to determine all the features the user needed and desired. Another time of growth has been in writing this book. In conversations with my development editor, Whitney, I made a number of parallels between creating in design and creating in writing. I knew the stories I would send her were prototypes, and she would see how useful they were for the project. We sorted, created, revised, and edited. At one point, we were facing the deadline for submitting the first draft. I looked at what there was to do and set forward to make it happen. I completed the first draft of everything we had discussed and had it in her hands early. It was a great feeling. Whitney congratulated me and exclaimed, "You have written a book." In my mind, the first draft was complete. I checked it off my list. Whitney's words were true, but in looking back, I'm not certain I absorbed them. I have never been an aspiring author, so I also do not have years of knowledge in how to be an author. To me, a book is when there is something to purchase at the store or on my Kindle. So to me, a first draft was just a step. Still, how many people make it that far? In the beginning of the project, we were told only 2% who start will actually finish writing a book. Another statistic floating around the internet says 3%. In any case, I hung up the call with Whitney and went on as if it was any other day. It was 2 weeks before I officially submitted the first draft to the publishing house. Whitney had made a number of suggestions, and I decided to use that time to work on those. One of the suggestions was to take one chapter and split it into 3. In fact, this is the second of those 3 chapters. The first of the 3 went very well, and I toyed with the idea of completing these chapters before the official submission. As I started to pull the words apart and look for other stories to make the points needed, the optimism started to fall away, and the book started to feel incomplete. In a way, my idea of completing these 3 chapters placed the first draft back on my task list. I literally had not even given myself a full day to bask in the joy of completion before I redefined complete and snuck it back on the list. A low-level growl sat in my gut for that whole week. When I finally realized what I had done, I stopped and asked myself why. I know this is just a first draft, and there will be at least 3 more drafts coming. I know iterations are needed to get to something wonderful, just like there must be layers of rock removed to find the gemstone. Why was the growl present? Why was I not enjoying myself? The answer from my reflection was I had not stopped to accept the accomplishment. Deep down, I still assumed the only definition of complete was the one where the book was printed on paper with a hardcover. So while I said complete and told that growling tiger I checked it off my list, I didn't really believe it. Layers or iterations are an important part of the process that works towards something valuable. Planning for those iterations is essential to reaching those goals. Working that plan can create results, but it is important to realize acknowledging stages of completion and celebrating the accomplishments along the way are even more necessary than the planning itself. We can then look at our list and move to the next phase filled with possibility.